What is up, YouTube? I am ShakCentral, and this is Vortex for everyone. Hello and welcome to Path of Exile for everyone. My name is ShakCentral, and this is the guide update for the 3.14 Ultimatum League version of the build. Today we're going to talk about the gear, we'll talk about the budget gear, how to craft your own gear in SSF, we'll talk about the endgame CI version of the gear, Chaos Inoculation, and then we will talk about the most powerful version of the build, which is the low-life variant using Chevron's wrappings. So we'll go through the gear, we will take a look at the skill trees, we'll talk a little bit about the different filters you can use, we'll talk about some of the main mechanics that we use in the build. Then finally, we'll go over leveling. We'll talk about the quick things like the Bandits, the Pantheons, the Ascendancy points and which order to take them in. And finally, I'll answer some of the most frequently asked questions that I get, and you will be all set to take this build into Ultimatum League. All right, now before we get into the gearing of the build, I decided to give myself just a few seconds for some kind of self-promotion, so here goes. If you've liked this content, please consider following me on Twitch and subscribing to the YouTube channel. I stream pretty regularly on Twitch a few nights a week, and I will be streaming the Ultimatum League launch as well. In addition, we have a very active Discord of mostly Vortex members that would love to help you out with any questions you have or build advice or even crafting, and you can always ask questions in the forum guide and get the same level of help from a very helpful community. Additionally, you can find links in the description below to the guide, to the path of building, and any other helpful links that you might need. So check the description below for more information and to find the guide itself. Now let's get into it. All right, now let's discuss the budget and kind of early mapping gear for the build. Within the POB, we're going to be using the CI level 80 tree as kind of our example here. And let's take a look at the items. Now this will be pretty quick because for the most part, I've actually set this up so that basically all you have is gear, I think with the exception of, just the body armor. This is basically all gear that you can alt spam for and then regal and try to get a good roll. And as you can see, it leaves us with over 600k Vortex DPS, leaves us with energy shield that you can get anywhere from 5 to 7k by just using this method. So it's very, very easy to make. And the idea is with most of your defensive slots, you're basically just looking for energy shield and resist. Your amulet, your rings, your belt are a good place to shore up all of the attributes that you're going to need in the build. But for the most part, you're just looking for energy shield, resistances, basically building up your defenses. With boots, movement speed is a good bonus. And with wands, you really just want a couple of good damage mods. You want things like high spell damage over time, a high cold damage over time multiplier roll, which by the way is different if you read the guide. 20 is actually giving you more damage in this wand than the 55% increased spell damage. So cold dot multi-rolls, a +1 to cold or spell skill gems, things like that. You want a couple of good rolls on your wand, but for the most part, the rest of this can pretty much shore up your defenses, and then things like your shield, your amulet, and your rings are a good place to add some damage to the build if you manage to cap resists and get a good amount of energy shield. For flasks, until you move to your unique flasks, you can use a granite and a sulfur. You'll be using a granite anyway later on because of the Ruby's Concoction is a granite flask. And the sulfur flask is a good replacement for the time being because it gives you a large amount of increased damage, which you desperately need early on. Other than that, all the way through the build, you're going to be keeping these three main flasks. You're going to be using a basalt, you're going to be using a quicksilver, and a quartz. And I highly recommend staunching and warding as your two most important suffixes on your flasks. Now for the endgame Chaos Inoculation version of the build, we're going to be using this tree in the POB, the final CI tree with a cluster jewel. Now this would be for a couple of different types of players. SSF players who don't have access to Chevron's wrappings or Prison Guardian, people who don't quite have the currency yet to move over and invest in the low-life version, or people who might just prefer CI if you like super high energy shield totals and you don't mind having slightly lower damage or, you know, quite a bit lower damage. The CI version can be for you. So let's talk about the items here. We'll start with the rares because for the most part, the rares are just better versions of the budget or self-crafted gear. For your wand, you definitely want to either purchase or unveil your own trigger socketed spell mod. It's still worth it even after the nerf, I promise. But you want better rolls. So things like +1 to level of all cold spell skill gems is very good. Higher rolls on the cold dot multi or higher spell damage rolls will do a lot of damage. For your shield and for most of the others, again, the primary thing is to cover your resists and stack up a high amount of energy shield. If you can accomplish that, you can add damage in some of these places. So for instance, the shield can get a +1 level to your cold spell skill gems, just like your wand. You can get spell damage rolls on your shield, which would be very nice. Gloves can be crafted. The fingerless silk glove can have an implicit of spell damage, and you can craft cold dot multi on some gloves. Your amulet can be a good place to get damage over time. It can be a good place to get spell damage or a % increased max energy shield and add a whole lot of defenses to you. And similarly, you can get a lot of attributes, a lot of resists. Your rings are going to do a lot of heavy lifting for the more mundane pieces of the build. So put a lot of resists on your ring, stack up a lot of attributes on your ring if you can, and they're going to do a lot of heavy lifting for you. Now, when it comes to the uniques, we really only have 3 that I would recommend, and 2 of them can be used or not used, really up to you. But the main unique you want with the CI version is Rhyme Gaze. Rhyme Gaze is almost literally unbeatable. It would take, and we've estimated this out with some of the top tier players I've talked to. We've estimated it would take somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 to 500 exalts to craft a helmet that is consistently better than Rhyme Gaze. And even then, it's only a small percentage better. So you're talking about a 1 chaos unique that is very, very, very good. So use your Rhyme Gaze and you'll be very happy with it. Syntrek boots are this is just kind of a placeholder. You can use Syntrek, you can use a Rainbow Stride, or you can just use an actual pair of boots that are crafted with movement speed and your energy shield and resist. It's up to you. The boot slot is very, very flexible. You just want good movement speed and resist if you can get them. Maybe some attributes, whatever you can get on boots is going to do you just fine. It's a very flexible spot. And then for your belt, you can use a crystal belt here, just like the low-light version would. If you can stack up a whole lot of energy shield, you can basically make a crystal belt that is very, very good, or you can just use Baited Breath. Baited Breath is really, really strong. You get a little bit of damage. You are missing out on potentially a high strength roll. So something like this could cover some of that missing strength requirement. But if you can cover it on another piece of gear, your Baited Breath is going to be really, really strong, and it's another cheap and strong unique. But if you have a crystal belt, you can make crystal belts that are significantly better than Baited Breath, so don't worry about it if you have one of those. For flasks, you'll see these flasks stay the same. We upgrade our regular granite to a Rumi's Concoction, which basically just gives us a lot more block chance for both attack and spells. And then the big change is swapping out our sulfur flask for a Cinder Swallow urn, and it's amazing. This flask is so good. You're going to recover mana, you're going to recover energy shield. When you're on your low life version, you're going to recover any life that you're missing. If you can unveil a movement speed mod, it is going to be a huge quality of life boost to you, but it is not necessary. What you really want is to try to, if you can, divine maybe even, and get the highest possible 3% recovery for all of these. Cinder Swallow Urn is going to do a ton of work for you. And then as far as the jewel sockets go, we have 2 unique jewels. The energy from within is not going to change. That's pretty much always the recommendation in this spot. It's very, very good and gives you a lot of energy shield. This spot can be an intuitive leap. You can take those 3 nodes that are unallocated or unpathed to and be happy with your intuitive leap, or you can do what the low life version does, and you can go to a large thread of hope, in which case you can just allocate the nodes that you see on the low life tree for the large thread of hope. It's up to you. As far as the rest of the jewels go, there's a couple of open jewel sockets that are just used for, you can see kind of a generic damage-based cobalt jewel. You can get some attributes on it. You can get a whole lot of damage modifiers on it. There's a big pool of damage modifiers. You can get some resists if you really need them, but those two slots are open for just general jewels, or if you have a Watcher's Eye, you can socket it in there. And then your cluster jewel is pretty simple. You want Brush with Death. If you can get it, it gives you basically a mini Cinder Swallow Urn effect. Gives you a lot of recovery, gives you some damage, and it's very, very strong. And then you can transition right into the small cluster jewel that is % energy shield and with the energy from Naught notable, which gives you a super high flat boost to your energy shield. And that's pretty much it for the CI gearing. It's pretty simple. All right, now it's time for everyone's most exciting part, and that is the low life version gearing. We're going to come back to this tree later in more detail because there's a lot of important things in here, but just know that this is the skill tree that we're going to be working with here. It's the low life tree, assuming that we're using the 2 cluster jewel nodes. So let's look at the items. Let's talk rares first. When you're looking for a wand, you basically, it's going to be similar to the Chaos Inoculation wand. As a matter of fact, it might even be, it's very close to the same wand. You're looking for the same stuff. It doesn't really matter. You're looking for levels to cold spell skills. You're looking for intelligence, spell skill gems, looking for cold damage, cold.multi, spell damage, all that stuff. Nothing's changed there. You just want as good a wand as you can get. Your gloves and your boots are the slots where you can get some very cool crafted stuff on there if you know what you're doing, or you just want to spend and kind of shell out for the good gear. But basically, you can get a lot of resists on here. You can get move speed. If you notice on the boots, you can get there's a lot of items that you can get the aspect of the spider on. Boots is one of them. But the bigger thing is for boots, you want to make sure you have the critical strike chance enchant, which should be easier, or I guess less punishing to farm in lab now. You want that crit to keep up elemental overload, and for the elusive mod, that's what you really want on your boots. There is the 10% chance to gain elusive on critical strike. For your gloves, I recommend fingerless silks for the spell damage implicit, and then also crafting on cold.multi, and this is another thing where you could find crafting guides in the Discord for gloves similar to this. For your other 2 rares that aren't, we'll talk about jewels later, but for the other 2 rares, your ring that's opposite your Mark of the Shaper, you want to make sure this is an Elder unset ring. You need the Elder ring part to turn on the Mark of the Shaper spell damage, and you need the unset ring because we are pretty gem starved, and otherwise you're going to have to give up a lot of quality of life on another gem socket. Basically, with this ring, you're looking for resists. You're looking to shore up any attributes that you need. You're basically going to be taking stock of what you need and trying to get the attributes and resists to help you cap out because you're using so many other uniques. Similarly, for the belt, this is another thing you could get aspect on. This is something else that you can use to shore up things like your strength or your resists. And Shaper crystal belts can give you some really cool mods, including things like the increased energy shield from body armor. So let's talk uniques. It's no surprise, Chevron's wrappings is it's basically the item that makes the whole build work. You need this if you're going to go low life so that chaos damage does not bypass your energy shield. Everyone knows that this is the thing that makes the build work, and you need one. It can work on a 5 link. Try to save up for your 6 link. It's one of the best items that you can get and really enables you to swap over. Similarly, the Prism Guardian. I would not swap into low life until I had both of these, and that's really the only big thing. If you're a little bit more experienced, the only 2 items that you need to comfortably swap over to low life. The Prism Guardian is a very nice shield. Doesn't have a lot of energy shield, but it gives its socketed gems blood magic, and just to note, that's not changing in Ultimatum League. It's still giving them blood magic. They have reduced mana reservation as well, so you're able to put 3 auras into here, and we'll talk about that in the skill gem setup, but basically they're going to reduce even less mana, and it's going to let you put all 3 of those on blood magic, and this is what takes you into the low life range. There is an option, if you really want to, you can use, I guess I don't have one in here, but there is an option you can do low life shields. It's basically similar to the Chaos Inoculation shield, which is recovery of ES on block. You want something like spell damage and things like that, but nothing beats the Prism Guardian. Always go for the Prism Guardian if you can. Just like in the CI version, the Rime Gaze is a great option for your helmet. It's really the only option, so especially in a trade league, you want to make sure you get this. The presence of Chayula allows you to not be stunned, and it gives you a ton of energy shield. Converting a ton of your life over to ES is very powerful. Gives you a lot of chaos resistance, which would bring you naturally up to 0, which is way better than you think if you're a new player. 0 chaos resist is pretty good. It's not like the other resistances where it needs to be at 75% to feel good. Additionally, you'll feel the increased rarity. It will be really nice. And you can allocate Tranquility onto this for your biggest DPS upgrades. There are other options in the written guide, but I recommend Tranquility here. The flasks don't change. You still have your Basalt, your Quicksilver, your Quartz, and then your Roomies and your Cinder Swallow. Now, from the jewel sockets, you'll notice we have a ton of them. Starting with, as I mentioned in the CI section, Thread of Hope. You want a large Thread of Hope. This is what allows you, if you notice on the right-hand side, we'll go back to the tree for a second. This allows you to pick up Breath of Rime, Heart of Ice, Utmost Intellect, Snowforged, and Arcane Focus. It's a huge quality of life upgrade to be able to take these very nice notables here without having to path over to them. So that's where your Thread of Hope should go. The energy from within stays right there. Now, when it comes to jeweling, let's just take a quick second and talk about this. So the main focus is going to be, it's easier if we move out here. In the large jewel sockets, you want the same type of jewel. You want, if you can get it, an 8 passive skill jewel. You want it with the increased cold damage, and you want it with 3 notables on it. There are some ways to get this crafting. I've listed them in the guide for some better ways to get this, hopefully a little easier for you. But basically, the notables don't matter too much. Deep Chill, Disorienting Display, and Cold-Blooded Killer are going to be your best options, along with, I think it's Prismatic Eclipse off the top of my head if I'm remembering right. For your mediums, you're going to have 4 medium cluster jewels. You are either going to want 1 or 2 of the 4% cold damage over time multipliers with a Brush with Death notable. That's a kind of a mini Cinder Swallow Urn effect that give you a lot of recovery. You want 1 or 2 of those, and then you want 2 or 3 of the increased effect of non-curse auras, medium clusters, and you're going to want to roll these to have at least replenishing presence. Presence gives you effect of your non-curse auras from your skills, and it gives you some more energy shield regen, which is very, very nice. So basically, both of those techs are going to increase the amount of regen you get, because the aura effect is going to affect vitality. It's also going to give you mana regen. It's going to make all of your auras better. It's going to give you more energy shield, more everything that you want. So these are very, very powerful, and if you can pick up at least 2 of them, theoretically 3 would be better, and then 1 of the Brush with Death jewels, because you do have the Cinder Swallow Urn. So yeah, get these, roll them for replenishing presence. First Among Equals is the second best choice there because it gives you more aura effect, but the one that we really want is that replenishing presence. And then for 2 of the 4, you don't really have the skill points to support it, but you want 2 small cluster jewels here with 6% increased maximum energy shield, and then you want to finish off with a massive ES boost from these big old energy from naught notables. And that's mostly it for the jewels. There are other jewel sockets that we take. If you notice going down here, there's 1, 2, 3, and 4 more sockets that we can pick up pretty easily. I use the same jewel for each just as an example, but again, same as in all the other open jewel sockets in the other versions, you're going to want attributes, you're going to want spell damage, you may want some resist to help finish it off. These are pretty flexible, and that is the gearing for the low life version of the build. Now let's go over the skill links. For leveling, which we'll talk about shortly, these are all listed in the notes section. It's a lot more involved because you're swapping gems in and out constantly as you level, so I've moved it to its own section, but this is the reminder for you. Now, there are your 2 main damaging setups. These are staying the same whether you are Chaos Inoculation or Low Life, so we'll go over them here, listed in order of importance. You've got Vortex, Efficacy, Hypothermia, Elemental Focus, Controlled Destruction, and Swift Affliction. For your Val Cold Snap, you're going to have the skill, Bone Chill, efficacy, and hypothermia. And note here that concentrated effect, this will come in your Rhyme Gaze. So you'll get conk effect in your Rhyme Gaze here. You can see it. So it'll be a smaller AoE, but deal more damage. Now, for the build-specific links, for Chaos Inoculation, before you have your trigger craft unveiled or purchased, you're going to have Orb of Storms linked with a Hex Touch and Frostbite. So it'll apply Frostbite as it hits enemies, but it'll be self-cast. After you have the trigger craft on your wand, you'll be placing Orb of Storms in there, Frostbite, and Stormbrand. Again, the trigger craft change, or the socketed trigger has changed from 4-second cooldown to 8, but this is still viable and will still be helpful for you, even with a longer cooldown. In your gloves, this can go in either gloves or boots, but in one of your 4 links, you're going to have your Vol Discipline, you're going to have Malevolence. Those are your 2 auras in the CI build. You're going to link them with an Enlighten, if possible, to even lower their mana cost. And then this is kind of your flex spot. So we've had a lot of discussion about this. This can be a lot of things. I really like Frost Shield for the League mechanic. It's going to help you survive in the Ultimatums. It's going to do a lot of good work for you in Delve, and I've had a lot of success running this in a CI build. However, there are other things you can do. You can swap in basically any single gem swap that you really like. If there's a low-cost aura that you can make fit somehow with this, you can run it. If there's really anything that you think would be helpful for you, you can run it. This is your flex spot. And then for the other item, you are going to have Flame Dash linked with Arcane Surge, Second Wind, and Faster Casting. Note that the Chaos Inoculation version does have a little bit more quality of life when it comes to their movement skills, because there's some more room for gems, because they're not reserving as many for auras. And then finally, in your shield, you're going to have a Cast When Damage Taken, Immortal Call, and Increased Duration Setup. And those are the CI links. Now for low life, we've got a few changes here from the previous versions of the build. So in your trigger wand, you're going to have Orb of Storms, you're going to have Tempest Shield, and you're going to have Frost Bomb. Again, even with the changes from 4 seconds to 8 seconds on the trigger, this is still very good. Tempest Shield duration is already longer than the cooldown. Orb of Storms lasts 6 seconds, so it's already 3/4 of the length of the cooldown, so it's not a big deal to miss out on those 2. It is some downtime, but not a ton. And Frost Bomb only lasted for 2 seconds anyway, so we're dealing with it, or we're using it more for the exposure anyway. It was not a big deal. For your curses, they've been moved to a self-cast Hex Touch setup. We'll go over this a little bit more in the tree when we just talk about the general build concept here in a minute, but you don't need to have Elemental Equilibrium on all mobs. You only need this for bosses. You have more than enough damage to kill anything that's white, blue, or yellow with no problem. So for bosses, you're going to toss a Stormbrand on them, and it's going to continuously apply whatever your 2 favorite curses are. You can use Temp Chains and Frostbite as kind of the default. If you're looking for a little bit more damage, you could use Elemental, Elemental Weakness, I think, or Elemental Weakness, I think, in here in place of Temp Chains. Sorry, went brain dead there for a second. But yeah, whatever your 2 favorite curses are, you can put them in here for Stormbrand and just self-cast them for bosses. Now for your boots, or whatever your movement skill item is, you're going to have 2 different link setups. The first one is you're going to simply have a Flame Dash with an Arcane Surge. And take note of the Arcane Surge level here. You only want to level it up so that if you notice on the first line there, it says gain Arcane Surge after spending a total of, you want that mana cost to not be more than your Flame Dash mana cost. So you keep that in line so that every single time you Flame Dash, you are proccing Arcane Surge. And then in the other 2 link, again, you want to have 2 blue sockets linked here, and then 2 blue sockets linked here in the same item. If you link them all together, the Arcane Surge is going to cause your Clarity and Discipline to reserve extra mana, so don't do that. But your other 2 ones are going to go to Vol Clarity and Vol Discipline. The Vol versions add a ton of quality of life, especially Vol discipline. So I highly recommend running the Vol versions. Your shield links are going to be the 3 auras that you're going to have for your blood magic reservation. You have Hatred, which gives you a bunch more cold damage. You have Zealotry, which is very important for one of the main defensive concepts of the build, and that's giving you consecrated ground when you hit a rare or unique. You also have crit chance, and you have more spell damage. And then finally Malevolence, which is the typical damage over time aura. You have more damage over time and skill effect duration. Finally, somewhere on your items, you want to have that aspect of the spider. And then in your unset ring, you're going to be running a max level Vitality. Vitality is taking a slight nerf, but it is still very strong in this build, and you want to put that in your unset ring. As one quick note, if you don't have an unset ring or don't want to run it or can't find it, the 2 options for what to replace it with would be to take out Arcane Surge, which is going to be a bit of a quality of life hit, and put Vitality in here, or even using Vitality in place of Zealotry here, but that's going to be even more of both a quality of life and damage hit. So I recommend highly getting an unset ring if possible, and those are the links for the build. Now, before we move on to the Bandits, the Pantheons, and the Ascendancies, I wanted to take just a quick minute and to kind of explain thematically what the changes are for this version of the low life build. Now, the CI version is still pretty much your typical Vortex build. It's focused on block. It's focused on very high energy shield, but we've made a few changes this league with the low life version. The primary change is, if you'll notice, we are now relying heavily on Zealot's Oath, which gives life regeneration applied to our energy shield instead of life. This is really important. So we are running things like Vitality, for instance, as an aura that gives us a huge amount of flat life regeneration. Playing off the Vitality theme, we have a bunch of effect of auras, both on the tree here, and on our cluster jewels all over the place. So all of these aura effects are also going to make Vitality even stronger. And then you'll also see across the tree we have all kinds of places like this where we are regenerating a portion of our life per second, and that is also true on our cluster jewels with things like replenishing presence. So we end up having just an absolutely huge amount of energy shield regen per second. If you notice over here, it's estimating we're at about 1,500 just in this version. You can push this way higher by investing more in aura effect and more in other things that will raise the regeneration. And we've seen some people running the build with 3,000 to 4,000 energy shield regeneration per second. In addition to this, you still have a decent amount of block. You still have a decent amount of dodge. You have things like disorienting display, being able to blind enemies. You have your curses, which you can use things like temp chains to slow enemies. Malediction for the build is going to cause enemies to deal less damage. And basically, there's just layer after layer after layer of defenses in this build, especially with your flasks as well, like Rumi's giving more block chance, and the Cinder Swallow Urn and the Brush with Death giving you a massive amount of recovery. So you've got to try if you want to die with this build. I'm going to be honest. It's a very strong version, and I'm really happy with where the build ended up for this league. All right, now as for our Bandits, our Pantheon, and our Ascendancy. For Bandits, it's pretty simple. 2 passive points is going to give you much more than anything else could. If you're really swimming in currency and don't mind the refund, you could always help Lyra out during the campaign, and then once you hit maps, respec, but I really don't think it's necessary, and it's going to be more expensive than it's worth. For Pantheons, I recommend Solaris. I think that you don't really need Lunaris because trash monsters aren't really any real threat. Solaris gives you a nice benefit against single targets, and is generally what I would take there. You have a lot of options for Minor Pantheon. Aberrath is really good for taking less fire damage, reduced ignite duration on you. This is what I'll likely be using. If you are planning on doing anything Reflect related, you can run a Sibyl's Torment Ring and Yugal and be completely Reflect immune, so that's an option for people that want to do some interesting stuff. Shikari is going to let you take reduced chaos damage and reduce the duration and effect of poisons on you, which is very strong. And then finally, Gruthgul and Garu Khan are both good options for just straight up defenses. This gives you more fizz reduction, and enemies that hit you have reduced attack speed if you can upgrade it. And then this one gives you evade chance if you've taken a big hit recently, and more move speed if you haven't been hit recently. So you got a lot of options there. I'm likely to take either Aberath or Gruthkul, but we will see. As far as Ascendancies go, this is what I would recommend. If for newer players especially, I would recommend starting off with your first Ascendancy by taking Vile Bastion. This is going to be a big boost to your survivability, and it's going to let you do a lot of other stuff of exploring kind of the boss fights and getting used to the play style of Vortex and staying safe while doing so. Your second and third labs are going to be Void Beacon and then Frigid Wake. You're going to build this out, so you're basically giving enemy, you're going to get a little bit of a damage boost from this, and then Frigid Wake just is a powerhouse. This removes your need for flasks with the heat suffix. It gives you a lot more damage, and it has some cool effects on top of that. And then finally, for your Uber Lab, until you go low life and apply 2 curses, you would go Profane Bloom, and then once you are low life, you would take Malediction. Now, the one thing I will point out with this is that this is a bit of personal preference between Profane Bloom and Vile Bastion in the low life version. I've been testing extensively lately without Profane Bloom, and I have to be totally honest, I don't really miss it that much. We don't scale AoE very much, so the Profane Bloom pops are not very big, and generally I find that enemies see you and aggro toward you and run into your vortexes anyway, so I don't honestly miss the Profane Bloom very much, and I've really enjoyed the extra regeneration from Vile Bastion, but this is personal preference, and you can go either way. All right, now before I end the video, I want to show you where you can find some more gameplay, as well as answer a few of the questions that I get asked very frequently. At the beginning of the video, you saw some clips from various kind of little gameplay cut and edited clips of Vortex. There's a link in the description below that you can find to the full gameplay video that contains all 3 of those fights. It uses the 3.14 skill setup and gear setup. It's actually slightly worse than the gear that's in the POB, just to show you that you can really do this fairly easily and consistently once you've learned the fights. And that video consists of a Maven Witnessed Tier 16 Chimera map, a Maven Witnessed Tier 16 Minotaur map, and a Shaper fight. So those are the clips that you saw at the beginning, and in the description below there is a link to the full gameplay of all 3 of those maps. Now, as far as frequently asked questions goes, since the patch notes came out, the thing that I've been asked overwhelmingly more than anything else is about the nerf to the trigger mod, the Unveil mod. The timer, the cooldown moved from 4 seconds to 8 seconds, and while I initially just about had a heart attack, it's okay. In a funny way, this was almost avoided completely, but by the new setup itself. So a couple things to note. First of all, the biggest thing to note is we don't need elemental equilibrium to be applied to anything that is not a boss or a unique monster. We almost instantly kill white, blue, and yellow monsters throughout any map at any tier. We have more than enough damage to kill them without any help, so elemental equilibrium is not needed for them. It's needed for a boss, and if you want permanent uptime on that, we are now self or hand casting, I guess they call it. We're hand casting Stormbrand, and it's applying 2 curses, and the Stormbrand is hitting for lightning damage, so that will always be applying elemental equilibrium in our favor. In addition, the Tempest Shield, anytime we block, we also hit the blocked monster for lightning damage, which gives us elemental equilibrium, and Orb of Storms lasts almost the entire length of the new cooldown anyway, so we still get those hits from Orb of Storms, and Frost Bomb never lasted even as long as 4 seconds anyway. It expires after 2 seconds, so the trigger nerf is not nearly as bad for our build as it is for some other builds, and we are going to be totally fine, so don't panic. I panicked initially so that you don't have to. Don't worry about it. When it comes to playing this in hardcore, or I'm also going to actually weirdly lump in the people that have asked about Wintertide brand. I have a recommendation that's kind of odd, and that is I would honestly look up Trickster. I would give it a try. Trickster, basically, I mentioned this in I think section 3.1 or something like that. Trickster has a little bit more defenses. It struggles a lot in terms of damage compared to the Occultist, but it has a little bit more of like a defensive quality of life. So if you're looking for like an alternative that might be just slightly more geared toward hardcore, I think this performs very well. But people have also had a lot of success with Trickster, so that is an option for you. Alternatively, you can just invest more. There are nodes very nearby some of the pathing we have on the skill tree for pure energy shield, and you can take those and build out to an even tankier build. Now, the bane of my existence is Vortex on left click. People ask about this all the time. They try to remind me, Shaq, did you know you can bind Vortex to left click and cast it because it's instant cast all the time? I know, and I hate it. I think it's bad. If you like it, more power to you. It's a flexible build that has flexible options even in the way that you use your skills. So if Vortex on left click is your thing, go for it. However, I don't like it, and the reason is simply that I like to have control. Vortex does have a cooldown, and that means there are times when you will Vortex at your feet here, you will run into a pack of mobs here while Vortex is on cooldown, and you would like to use it, and then as you walk through them, you will Vortex here because you're auto-casting it every time it's off cooldown. I like to have a little bit more control than that, but I understand if you want to use it on left click and not have to click as much, that's understandable, but it's not for me. And then finally, for console players, I love you all. I'm sorry you've had some troubles in the past, but hopefully with the next-gen systems, you may even be running better than me. At this point, I don't really know. For console players, it is really hard to target Cold Snap. For that reason, I recommend trying to extend the leveling guide, which recommends leveling with Creeping Frost and Vortex. I would try moving that out and running it in maps on console as well. Creeping Frost is kind of cool because all you do is aim in a direction and shoot it off in that direction, and it requires a lot less precise clicking than Cold Snap. So if you're on console, I would recommend giving Creeping Frost as a secondary skill a try. And that is going to be it for the 3.14 Ultimatum League version of Vortex for everyone. I think this is the strongest that the build has ever been with the low life variant, and I hope and trust that you're going to have a great time as you play it in the upcoming league. I'd love to know what you think about it. Leave a comment in the description. And again, if the video is helpful for you or you're interested in seeing more in the future and for future leagues for Vortex updates, then please hit that subscribe button. But that's going to be it. I will see you guys for the Ultimatum League start. You can find me on Twitch if you want to watch somebody streaming Vortex on day one. And that is it. Yeah, I am ShakCentral. I appreciate you watching so much, and I will see you guys in Ultimatum League.